everyone, good evening. You've tuned into the Money Show right here on ET Now, kick-starting Rise with India Prime Time Hour as always. I'm Mubina Kapasi, and today, here's what we have lined up on the show over the next 1 hour. This one is a retirement special. How to plan for your retirement, how much savings should you have before you hit retirement age is what we will be discussing in the first half of the show. However, for all you guys out there who are looking to retire early, when I say early, I mean in their 40s, what should you be prepared for? What should you brace yourselves for? Who else and who better than somebody who has been through that experience to share his experience with you? So this is certainly an interesting conversation I had. That'll come up for you in a bit. And finally, of course, some more money-saving mantras that you must follow in your retirement. Like I say, it's all about retirement. Whether you've not yet retired or are in fact at the verge of retirement or have already retired, this show is important for all of you. Because even if you've not yet retired, you still need to invest now and secure your future. In fact, the best time to plan for your retirement is when you're far away from your retirement, because that's when you get time on your side and much more ammunition to properly create the right amount of corpus by the time you retire. So the earlier, the better. But the question is, of course, how much is enough? That truly is subjective. But there are, of course, a whole host of questions you should ask yourself before you decide upon an amount that you believe would be enough for you by the time you hit the retirement button. But to talk more about that and, of course, to answer all the viewer questions and queries, speaking of, very shortly we will be opening our phone lines as well. So keep your questions and queries ready for our Ask the Money Show segment. The number and the email address will appear on your screens. But yes, like I was saying, to talk about this very topic, I have with me Mr. Loy Navlakhi. Mr. Navlakhi, thank you so much then for joining us on ET Now's very special show where we've decided to take upon the topic of retirement. It's something that's perhaps on everybody's mind, but we do believe that, hey, we're still a far away really from retirement. I mean, especially in your 20s and 30s, all you can perhaps think about is when am I saving up and how much am I saving up from my next trip. However, Mr. Navlakhi, explain to our viewers the importance of actually planning for your retirement or thinking of your retirement early.
Yeah, I think it's really right for everyone who starts work to actually think of retirement from the time they start work. But I know it's too much pressure for the people in their 20s to think about it. But as you sort of get to a stage where you have responsibilities, it's the better time to start planning. You may not be able to fulfill the entire amount that you need to put aside for retirement at that point in time. But the earlier you start, the better it is. So even if you can't, put aside the quantum of money that your advisor tells you for your retirement, start with a smaller amount. So you know that, you're already on the way. There is a pot that is being created for you, your piggy bank, which you will not be able to open till when you retire. So that there is a discipline that is built in, and then slowly and steadily you are making sure that your portfolio is growing for retirement. And the earlier you start, the more time that you have to build the portfolio. As you well know, the idea is that you can take more risk when you start off early and you have a longer period of time. And as you approach your particular goal, at that time liquidity starts getting more important. So at that time you can start reducing the amount of risk and moving more towards liquidity. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that certain benefits or certain things that you are used to in your working life will go away when you retire, which is maybe you have an office and there is a support system existing that won't be there. You'll have to probably do your own travel bookings and so on and so forth. Your medical insurance, you'll have to figure out whether you have adequate insurance or not. So these are various things that you need to plan for. But I'm sure you have more questions to ask, so I'll leave that for you to ask questions and I can respond to what needs to get done.
Exactly. So, Mr. Navlakhi, let's assume that our viewers have not yet started their retirement plan, okay? And let's say, let's divide it roughly into three age brackets. One is, of course, our early jobbers or the guys who've just started their jobs who don't have a care in the world right now about retirement. The second age group may be your middle-aged, maybe 40s, 50s. And then finally, those people who are just about on the verge of retirement, just ready to sail into the sunset. Of course, like you mentioned, building your portfolio. But for each of these three age groups, the constituents of the portfolio will vary. Like you mentioned, as you age, liquidity should take precedence. So let's start age group wise. For a younger one, in their 20s or in their early 30s, how should they start building their portfolio for retirement? Which are the assets that they should invest in?
So at that point in time when you are at the early stage of your working career and you're building a corpus, you're earning, you're possibly taking aside some savings and you don't really have a specific goal for that saving. That amount that you're putting away for retirement or for any of these goals is far away. It's a longer time horizon. So at this point in time, my suggestion is that just simply look at building your corpus through equity. For those who are working, you will also know that your company might be taking care of your provident fund. And the provident fund saving that goes, every month as a percentage of your basic salary is also something that is being earmarked or which that is available for you at the time of retirement. So count these two things definitely as part of your retirement goals. The third thing that you might want to do early on is to think about having a PPF account, a public provident fund account, so that the earlier you start, the minimum period for the first tenure of that PPF account is 15 years. So the earlier you start, you'll complete that 15 years early and then you have an option of rolling that over every 5 years. The good thing about PPF, while there is a maximum limit of 1.5 lakhs that you can put every year, the minimum amount that you need to keep in that investment account is only 500 rupees every year. And that's something that you can help to build. So in that early age, your objective is to just increase the amount of corpus which is going to be available to you at retirement. At that stage, you don't really want to lock into things where you don't have leeway to move out of. So these are a few things that you can start off with at that age. When you move to the next sort of age bracket, when you are maybe in the 40s and 50s, maybe early 40s, think about adding the NPS as part of your investment, because by that time maybe you are now earning more than you are really spending or you need for your goal. So you want to take out 10% of your basic salary, which is what is allowed today, go through the company and ask them to put it into the NPS or the new pension scheme. So that again, that part is now being locked in by you, which is not going to be available to you till the time you retire. And at that time too, you'll be able to withdraw 30% of that amount tax-free, or an additional amount. I think it's 60% that you can take with subject to tax. And the rest will then go into an annuity. So at that age of 40, 50, maybe add an NPS element, think of a pension plan, and again some of these products which have lock-ins, that once you enter it's difficult for you to exit. These are things we would recommend to people who possibly have discipline as an issue, where if they put it in equity or they keep it in their bank account, they will use it for something else. Then some portion of this should go away into a product which you can't touch, because you know that this is the quantum of money that you will need at the time of retirement. As you
Okay.
approach into the 60s, and that's you're very close to retirement or you have just started retirement, I think one of the important things that will happen is psychologically you will feel very different. We've seen this with clients that they are very aggressive till probably the last month of working, and suddenly they get into a freeze mode. We have seen that happening. So people, when they're going through this transition, that they are moving from working to a retirement thing, they suddenly feel, oh, I'm losing control. I don't have more money to put in case something goes wrong. So for a period, maybe the first 2 or 3 years at that when you have retired, yeah, I think the biggest focus is on liquidity. You don't want to feel that you have less money. You don't want to feel that you can't spend for a vacation, or you can't spend for some medical or for some gadget that you need in the house, which will help you live life better. So those are things that you do in the early part. But there is an interesting other element that is slowly becoming visible in India, which is life expectancy and people living till much, much longer. So if you look around you, you will see quite a few people now in the 80s and 90s around you. And for them, and when you are in the 60s, you don't think about it. You think, oh, I've just retired. Maybe I have 10 years, 15 years to go. But you don't want your money to run out before you do. So it's very
What?
important for you.
You know, Mr. Navlakhi, you know what? One very important thing that many of our viewers do forget to do is also understand the power of compounding. This comes in when you think about maybe you want to defer making an investment for a year or 2 years. And that's where, Mr. Navlakhi, you have very aptly given two examples of two individuals. One who decided to start investing at 25 and the other who decided to start investing at 30. These are our two individuals, Linda and John. Linda decided to start investing at 25, whereas John decided to start investing at 30. Just 5 years has made a difference of more than 2 crore rupees in their corpus. This is essentially what you call the power of compounding. If you decide to start investing by 25, you will have 2 crore more in your corpus by the time you hit the age of 60, as opposed to somebody who has decided to start investing only at 30. That's where, Mr. Navlakhi, I want you to explain to our viewers of how the mathematics of this works and what exactly is it then in terms of an inspiration that you would give our viewers.
Yeah, so for many of the viewers who like to watch cricket, it's like the run rate required to meet the goal. If my end objective is to get 300 runs in 50 overs, I can get 6 runs an over. I can play the first 10 overs as maidens and then say, oh, now I have to get 7.5 runs per over to meet my target. So it is pretty much exactly that. And the idea is that the sooner you start putting in money and you start getting a return, the good thing is that 1 year later, 3 years later, the return starts paying up even on your returns itself. So in the first year, I put in 10 lakh is my income. I have decided to put 10% of my money towards retirement. I'm getting 12% return. So I put in 1 lakh. At the end of 1 year, I have got 1,12,000 rupees because I put in 1 lakh in the first year. Now in the second year, that same person is now not getting 12,000 but getting 14,400, and that amount keeps sort of growing stealthily, almost unnoticed. And that's where you see this big gap between the bar and in the graph of somebody who's just spent 5 years early and put aside 1 lakh per year. And in this example, one of the interesting things that you will have to remember is that we've taken 10% of your earning and then said there'll be a 5% increase in your salary. But we know in life, when we look at clients and we see their experience, that one, their increases may not be 5% every year. There could be one-off years when there is a big jump, A. B, the amount of spending and saving pattern changes. When you get married, when you have a child, then the child now in the early age you're spending a lot, then this now started to go to school, so your expense starts coming down. So you have the capability of actually pushing in some more money into this corpus, and then this gap will look significantly, the gap will be significantly wider. So the earlier you start, the much better it is.
All right, I don't know if you need any more inspiration, but I think getting a neat 2 crore rupees more is enough inspiration, at least for me, to kickstart the investing journey. But at this point of time, then, viewers, we'll keep our phone lines as well as our email address as well. That one's always open, but we'll definitely keep our phone lines open. 24990388. Call in now and Mr. Navlakhi will answer all your questions and queries with respect to saving up for your retirement or investing in your retirement. For now, we've received lots of queries via email, so I'm going to straight up get to answering that. Our very first question is coming in from Siddhartha Mishra. Siddhartha says, I have a lump sum of 15 lakh rupees to invest for my retired parents who are in their early 70s and are both pensioners, and so they would not need any income from this money. They're just primarily looking for wealth creation and diversification because they have bank fixed deposits. He intends to put this money in debt funds, equity, savings, balanced advantage kind of products, so they earn better returns compared to fixed deposits. Now he wants to know what kind of funds, but his time horizon is only 5 to 10 years. Now he is doing this for his retired parents who are already in their early 70s. Mr. Navlakhi, if there's anything that we just learned from you, is that as you age, you should invest in those products that are more liquid, that are more safer. So firstly, for Siddhartha, would it be wise to put that 15 lakh rupees in something other than an FD which the parents already have? Should he go for the equity and balanced funds that he does want to go for?
Yeah, I think that what I gather from the mail is that he's taking charge of his parents' finances. So he's taking the decision to move that money out of fixed deposit. And to that extent, as long as he's available as the safety blanket, I think it's a good idea to do this. It may be advisable for him to think of, like, for example, the Edelweiss Equity Savings Fund, the ICICI Prudential Balance Advantage, and then if he needs a short-term fund, then the IDFC short-term fund is a really very clean fund, and those are places where he can invest in. One other idea I have for him is that I have seen some other clients when they are managing the money for their parent, what they actually do is they fix with the parent that, okay, you are getting 7% return on your FD, I will guarantee you that, and they include this money in their portfolio, go by their risk profile, which could be a little more aggressive. And then in case they make extra return, they go and give their parents saying, okay, see, on the part that I invested for you, I got 8.5% or I got 9%. So there's extra 2% for you. So that's another way he could possibly think of it.
Okay, yeah, well, make sure that when you are investing for your parents, it does match the risk profile of your parents and not yourself, because your own portfolio may be such that you have the ability to take on more risk, but not your 70-year-old parents. So be mindful of that. Okay, next up, we have Vinayaka Vedya, who has sent in a question. Vinayaka says, I have heard about many annuity plans like LIC, SBI, etc. My question is, A, is it a good idea to buy an annuity for retirement? B, which company is good? So firstly, Mr. Navlakhi, for all our viewers who may be unaware, what exactly is an annuity? And of course, if you could help Vinayaka answer his question.
Yeah, so an annuity is essentially a plan where you are going to put in a lump sum of money, and by giving that money to that particular insurance company or fund manager of that insurance company, you're saying that I want a certain return from that annuity. Now, annuity come with various sort of terms and conditions. You can take an annuity for life, you can say minimum 10 years, you can say 10 years guaranteed and thereafter to the surviving spouse, and so on and so forth. So you can have different sort of terms and conditions. So you should sort of understand those options that are available and choose what's best suited for you. Each of these annuities today probably give you something like 6 to 7% per annum in terms of return. Of course, that is added to the income of that annuity holder. So typically this happens during your retired life. So logically, you might not have too much of other income. So you may be in a lower tax bracket. So keep that in mind. In terms of companies, I think essentially you need to go with some of the larger companies, LIC, ICICI, HDFC. These are some of the good names that you can invest in because you want to make sure that there's no risk with the product.
Okay, I hope that Annuity 101 explainer has been enough for all our viewers who are considering opting for that option for their retirement years. Do take note of that. And of course, there are lots of companies that do provide such annuity. LIC, SBI, like Vinayaka mentioned, are some of the examples, but there are a whole host of them. Do your research accordingly. Okay, we have Vinay Pahar who has sent in a question. He says, I retired last year in December. I am eligible to receive gratuity and pension. My company is asking me if I would like my pension all at once or over a period of time. To put it in taxation and technical terms, basically commuted and uncommuted pension. Both of these have a different tax liability as well that may be imposed. So you have to be mindful of that. What would be better in terms of time value of money is his question. Mr. Navlaki, like I said, commuted, uncommuted pension, both of them have a tax treatment that, he may have to pay taxation on, or TDS will be cut. So keeping that in mind, and also, of course, based on time value of money, inflation, etc., like Vinay has rightly pointed out, what option would you give him? What option would you advise he chooses?
So basically, in the pension plan, because this is something now that is already been invested in, he has an option at the time of retirement to compute probably one third of that amount. So that is the amount that is available to him tax free. And I think that is logically something that you would take out from there, because you can try and find other investment options with that amount, which may give you a return which is slightly better than the annuity. So the rest of that money needs to get converted to an annuity. As we said in the previous question, this is something that you might earn 6 to 7% on, but it's added to your income and it is taxable. And in gratuity, I think what he mentioned, it's 20 lakh basically is a maximum quantum of money that is tax free available to him, but it's linked to what is last salary drawn 15 days for every month or every year of work that he's had. So based on that, you need to decide. But I think there is no choice in gratuity. You have to take the amount at one go. So he'll take that amount at one go. I think it's a lot to do also with his cash flow requirement, his other financial goals when he decides, how much to commute, how much to take out, should I pay some tax and take away the money.
All right. Mr. Navlaki, just a question from my part. While we do know now that how we have to invest our money as we age, and of course even the benefits of starting to invest early, the question is, how can one arrive or come to the amount that one will need by the time you retire, which may be 30 years from now, 20 years, or even 5 years from now?
Yeah, so one of the ways that you want to work with is, so for the time being, assume that you have some time that you are working, then you will retire, and then you have to estimate how long you require that money in retirement. So what's your life expectancy? So if I take a simple number and say that, after my retirement, let me plan for 30 years, then for every 1 lakh of rupee that I require in terms of expenditure at the time of retiring, for 1 lakh of rupees, if I'm earning anywhere between 1 to 3% over and above the rate of inflation, then I need broadly about 15 crores of rupees, between 13 to 17 crores. So say 15 crores of rupees is what I require at the time when I have retired, and that will take care of 1 lakh starting from that day. So if you think today you are at the age of say 40 and your expenditure is going to be 1 lakh rupees a month, then first thing that you need to do is to inflate that amount to that age of 60 when you retire. So if it is 20 years from today, then it is quite likely that at even 5 or 6% inflation rate, then that 1 lakh will actually equal to maybe 2.5 or 3 lakhs of rupees. So that's the first thing you arrive at. The other thing you say, okay, I now have 20 years for my retirement and I need to hit this target of 15 crores of rupees or 25 crores of rupees. Now, this seems like a very, very large number, but for people who have, say, 20 years to invest, then if you were just to put aside 1 lakh rupees, 10,000 rupees a month, which is 1 lakh 20,000 a year, at the end of 20 years, you would end up with something like 1.25 crores of rupees. So you already probably at the age of 40 have some corpus, so that's already earning some money, and then you are adding this additional sum of money on a monthly basis. And I've taken a very low figure of 10,000 for just for an example. So if you, let's say, were in a position to do 1 lakh rupees a month at that point in time, then your corpus would go to maybe 15 crores of rupees anyway by the time you reach your retirement age. So the calculation is to do with life expectancy, with rate of return till the time you retire. And the third thing that you need to take into account, what's the quantum of money that you need every month? And then what is the rate of return I will get over inflation in my retirement tenure?
All right. On that note, Mr. Navlakhi, thank you then for joining in on this very special retirement edition of the Money Show. It was a 101, folks. Firstly, of course, how should you plan for your retirement? What are the various steps that you need to take when you retire, or rather when you're working to save for your retirement? And then secondly, how much do you need? Speaking of how much do you need, Mr. Navlakhi as well shared his pointers. But here are some very important questions you yourself should also ask yourself and tick the right boxes and then look at it holistically. So this is what you must ask yourself. Question number one, when do you want to retire? It may be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, at the age of 60, 65, 70, or in some cases even at the age of 40, because retiring early is certainly a fad that everybody wants to adopt. So ask yourself, how many years do you have left before you retire? Secondly, how much do you spend now? And I'm talking about your lifestyle expenses, one which cannot be sacrificed. For example, food, clothing, household expenses, your daily budget. How much is it coming to on a monthly and then annual basis in terms of your total spending? Find out what is it that you need in terms of your money now. Extrapolate this. Point number three then. How much will your spending increase when you retire? And mind you, it will increase because A, you have the big inflation monster, which is very, very strong in India. And B, medical expenses, health expenses. As you age, so do unfortunately our health problems. Always make a provision for that as well. So taking into consideration those 2 pointers, in all probability, your spending will only increase. Next question, how will your spending change after retirement? Like I said, you may want to kick back your shoes and take that big Miami cruise or the cruise for Bahamas. That's where your spending will change dramatically. But otherwise as well, there will be some changes in your spending. And by that I mean your medical expenses, your hospital expenses. Unfortunately, that is an expense that's inevitable, and it's something that you must prepare yourself for. Most important question, how long do you expect to live post-retirement? Like Mr. Navlakhi as well pointed out, we do see a lot of people around us, thanks to advanced healthcare systems across the country and great research and development. It is something that has led to increased life expectancy. So it's very normal now to see, our silvers who are aged 85 and above. This is something that you must ask yourself. You should also ask yourselves questions like, what's your lifestyle? I mean, if you unfortunately do have the habit of, smoking a cigarette, now is the time when you should kick your butt. That's of course on a health perspective, but all of that should be considered when you take into consideration, or rather, estimate how much you expect to live post-retirement. And then, of course, will you be indebted when you retire? Do you think you're still going to have to push your home loan EMI or any other EMI that you may have into post-retirement? That, by the way, is a very dangerous thing to do. And of course, finally, will you be having any sort of regular income? It may be if you have wisely invested in any sort of real estate, so you may be getting rental income from there. That as well is a question to ask. So these are some questions to ask yourself when you consider retirement, and accordingly, looking at everything holistically, take your investment decisions accordingly. We'll do one thing, we'll just take a very quick break right here on The Money Show. But when we come back, for all the folks out there who want to retire in their 40s, pay heed to one such early retiree and how his journey was when he decided to retire early. It's a fad, right, Naresh? I mean, retiring early and then, of course, sailing into the sunset, pursuing all your passions. So let's start off first with then, what exactly inspired you to retire early in the first place? When did you first start thinking about retiring early?
It has been an interesting round trip, and in that globally. So I started off my career in broking and was working with Kotak Securities in 90s. And then I ended up into capital market consulting with TCS for over 15 years. And in that course, I have seen a lot of exchanges, investment banks, how markets, economies operate, and was increasingly fascinated. But my career in consulting took me away from investments, and I knew the passion to pursue would have to be in my retired journey. I came across the concept, hedgehog concept by Jim Collins in his book Good to Great. That a company or an individual, a professional needs to operate at the intersection of three concepts: passion, skill set, and opportunity. And I knew that my professional career was not squarely in the intersection of this. I was skilled, not quite passionate, and was paying me reasonably well. But investing was definitely squarely in the passion and skill set opportunity. But I don't know how it will pay me. And hence I thought, let me go through my career, build up savings, and then do it as a passion post retirement. So that's how the seeds of my early retirement was sown.
But had you always, I mean, when you started off your career, you know, back in the 20s, did you always have it in your mind that you want to retire early, and did you accordingly perhaps, you know, choose your career path, or did you consciously take steps that, hey, I have this goal of retiring at, you know, 40, 45, and did you consciously take certain steps?
So this was not quite at the initial stages of the career. That time we were kind of, what I would say, jobs were not as plentiful and careers were not as lucrative when I graduated. This came through in 5, 10, 15 years of my career. My tracking global markets, watching how markets operate globally also was building up my skills. So I realized I was investing pretty well. During the first 15, 20 years of my consulting career, I made some very lucky investment decisions, primarily aided by how I was tracking economies, markets, commodities. And so I knew that some magic was working. I was staggering at rates which I think would have probably compared with what top fund managers were doing.
Yeah.
And there's also a good friend, Govindlal Gilda from Hyderabad. He's been my client in my broking days and now a good friend. So he was the guy who was prodding me. I should be towards investing and not quite into consulting, because he was following how I was doing. He was my window into the investment market. I knew nobody else in investing. So I used to talk to him even when I was working in Switzerland. I used to talk to him once a week. We used to share ideas.
Your mentor.
So yeah, he became, he was, you could call more than a mentor. Really was the guy instrumental in pushing me, because leaving a good job is not going to be easy for any one of us, because if we are good in the job, then the incomes are rising and it's a treadmill. So your salaries are rising and the hurdle is increasing every passing year. There are multiple facets of how one can retire early, but the number one consideration is financial. So, and one mistake I've observed some of them thinking on is that, let's say my annual spend is 12 lakhs a year. I can put an FD which gives me 12 lakhs interest a year. That is not going to work, because that doesn't account for inflation, that doesn't account for uncertainties on investments, that doesn't account for lump sum expenses which can come. So what I had figured out, that apart from a fully paid house and no debt, one needs to have a corpus which has to be a multiple of your annual spend. And assuming someone makes 10-12% a year return on the corpus and there's a 4% inflation, so one could spend half of real return, post-inflation return. That would need a corpus which is 30 to 50 times one's annual spend. So
in terms of basically the steps that maybe, you know, as a working individual, maybe in their early 20s, and if they do have this goal that I want to retire after working for 20 years, during their working life, during that span of 20 years, what steps should he or she proactively take to help them in that journey beyond?
So of course the journey has to be to build a retirement corpus, and it has to be via investments in a diversified portfolio of assets. It could be equities, equity mutual funds. I also had gold because gold was doing well. Could be in debt, liquid funds. But yeah, the corpus has to grow. If one puts everything in debt and fixed income, I doubt one can reach 40-50x of your annual spend, because your spend itself will be going up and the incremental savings from your salary is not going to be sufficient. So one needs to be in growth assets, which is where I was, and and built up my portfolio.
Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about what happens after you retire, because after that as well, while it sounds like a great idea, you're sitting on the beach sipping margaritas and not a care in the world, but the fact is your income has stopped. How important is it to have passive sources of income, or let your money work for you while you're out there sitting on the beach? I mean, how important, or what sort of stress would you put on passive sources of income?
That's for in my case, I'll tell what I did, and then I could relate to what some of my friends have done. So I literally taken the plunge that things will work with some basic portfolio construct. If one had heard, I had come across and heard the commencement speech of Steve Jobs, which he gave at Princeton University in 2005, where he talks about a concept of connecting the dots. So he says, looking forward, one can never very conveniently, comfortably, or surely connect the dots. It has to be some hazy concept. So although I had built up a portfolio which covered this 30-40x, once I came across this concept, I said that it's now gelling with what I want to do. It is a bit into the unknown, but it looks like if Steve Jobs is saying that, I did relate to what really happened. Now coming to how one can build passive income, it has to be, the portfolio of 30, 40, 50x has to be in a diversified set of assets, because one should never get into a situation that one has to, due to financial reasons, look back to joining your career. That would be very, very demoralizing. So it has to be in a diversified set of investments so that they counterbalance the returns. Of course, if one has a good property, that could be a rental income, but rental yields are 2-3%. So, but yeah, commercial assets are giving 6-7%. So one could have that. But for me, what worked was equities. And when I was leaving, the equity dividend yields were on the portfolio 4-5%. And I wanted to spend not more than 2.5% of my portfolio. So the dividends themselves were comfortably covering what I would need to manage my expenses post-retirement.
Okay, all right. Do you believe that after retirement, after this early retirement, you have to actively take steps to also restrict the way you're spending money? I mean, do you think you had to cut corners in any way?
So good question, and I didn't. If at all there is a time to cut expenses, it is before.
Okay.
If one were to cut expenses post-retirement, it will again be demoralizing. Yeah. You don't want people to say that although you would have left your job, but people will say he's lost his job. So the time to cut is several years before you retire, that you invest those savings, which is what I frankly actively did. The house I bought or the car I had were a notch below what I could have afforded in my job. Because I was okay. I mean, I didn't want to show to anybody that I have arrived, because the satisfaction was more internal. But the time to really do it is before, and let those savings work over 3, 5, 7 years. And that's when the portfolio corpus gets built. And remember, this 30, 40, 50x is not going to be built if you spend bulk of your salary. It will be built if you spend maybe half or 60% or whatever, and then reinvest the savings.
Okay. So Naresh, is early retirement then for everybody?
Yes and no. If one were in a job like Warren Buffett, where he says, I literally tap dance to work every day. So you don't have to retire. But for most mortals like us, I don't think we are in those jobs. If the work is giving a lot of stress, then I think one needs to contemplate retirement. But definitely one needs to have a passion or a cause in which one will retire into. You can't retire into something which is nothing. It will demotivate you, or maybe you will get bored, or I don't know, whatever it is. It needs to be a cause or a passion, which is what you will retire into. And for me, it was macroeconomics and markets. I really enjoyed reading about markets. During my 5 years in Zurich, I was reading Financial Times cover to cover every day. I really enjoyed. I used to read half in the tram going home and the other half in the tram coming back. I had requested clients in the office, that please have the FT at the end of the day on my table. So yeah, it needs to be a passion towards which you will go into. and obviously the safety nets on finances will have to be built. That's the minimum hygiene requirement on which you have to contemplate whether you want to retire.
Okay, so leave us with some inspiration then, Naresh, as opposed to what your life was in the 20 years of your working versus what it is now. In an ideal retiree's life, that is you, how does your day start and how does it end?
So, of course, I enjoyed my job, but it required a lot of travel.
Yeah.
So, and most of my travel was abroad, so it took me away from family. For example, when my son's 12th standard board exams came and when his admissions to IITs were happening, I wasn't in Chennai. I felt very bad that I wasn't there sharing those joyful moments. So yeah, it was taking a toll on the family life to some extent. I'll tell again. So it was a little bit. I was compromising a bit on the family life, but of course enjoying my career and was doing well in career. But post-retirement is been a, I would say, wonderful journey. So I now allocate my time based on my priorities. Of course, I still work, I read up, I meet some companies or I invest. The only thing I don't like is doing taxes. But that's the only
Who
job.
Who likes that, right? Who likes paying taxes to the government?
Yeah, more than paying taxes, I'm happy paying taxes, but to do the tax
Filing.
work, yeah, that's the only thing of my job I don't like. But yeah, it's a very, I would say, balanced and dream journey, if I can call that. I travel, like our son studies in US, and so we go there once a year, stay with him. There's more time to learn yoga, or I'm learning flute. There's more time to be with parents, for example, or pursue other interests. I come home for lunch, although we have an office, so I spend more time in things. My daughter was doing an internship in Bangalore for 2 months in summer, so we spent some time with her. So yeah, those are the perks which I think one can never measure financially in terms of what one can do.
Okay, Naresh, thanks so much for that very inspirational journey, and I hope many of our viewers now think before they just spontaneously jump to quit their job and retire early.
Thank you.
Very interesting quote on retirement that you just read. But just before the break, we had Naresh Kataria, and of course before the Eicher Motors earnings, we had Naresh Kataria talking about what is the requirement financially that you need to prep yourself for, before you decide to retire early at your 40s and 45s. And one of them was generating passive income. Karunya Rao is of course still with me right here after those Eicher Motors numbers. And Karunya, I don't know if that must have inspired you as well to kick back your shoes and of course, chill and sail into the sunset at your 40s. But before you do that, passive income, it's something that we speak about very often, but we don't know what it is. So give our viewers some ideas on how one can generate passive income.
Well, Mubina, like you said, it is a dream come true if one could actually generate passive income. If there were a thing as passive income, which we, there are a few ways, of course, which we have shortlisted for our viewers as well right here on the show. The various ways they can make some money on the sides or some extra money by not actively being employed or not actively working. So, let's just call it passive income. Investing in FDs, liquid funds, dividend yielding funds. This is one way where, of course, there is some work involved. You have to find out where exactly you're getting good returns, good rate of interest if it's in the case of FDs, and you can park your monies there and forget about it. Buying corporate bonds, another way of making money. It's relatively a safer bet as well if you invest your monies in a safe haven, in a safe company with less risks. Of course, some amount of research, some amount of studying is involved there as well. Renting out a room in your house, now that is something that involves less brains to be applied, of course, but yes, like an Airbnb perhaps, or any kind of a similar PG sort of a setup you can have.
Subject to you doing proper homework on your tenant, of course.
So some homework definitely is involved. It's not like you can just chill out and make money. Of course, this is one of the ways. If you have some extra room lying in your house, house, extra space available, why not rent it out to at least somebody after doing a good amount of due diligence? Selling photos to Shutterstock. There are a whole host of websites, in fact, not just this particular one, but a lot of websites where you can sell pictures that you click using a good resolution camera. Why not make money? Why to just keep it in your albums and, you know,
but again,
keep them
you should be good, right, at clicking photos.
Of course, subject to your talent. Lastly, rent your assets. Well, you know, Mubina and I were just talking about how people are renting their wedding outfits, their designer wear, which they perhaps wear once or twice. What is it doing? What value is it really adding, lying in your closets, right? There are a lot of startups, a lot of options available right now wherein you can go and rent those outfits as well, where you can get decent money on the side. And lastly, there is P2P lending as well, another avenue which you can use perhaps to make some money on the side. But do remember, it's not entirely passive. Do not take it on the face value. Some amount of research, homework and due diligence definitely are required.
All right, so lots of ideas out there. I hope one of these do give you inspiration. Thanks a lot, Karanya, for that. Okay, well, that's of course your 101 on retirement. We've given you everything you need to know, right from how to plan yourself for retirement, whether it's 10 years from now, 30 years from now, or whether you want to retire early. And also, most importantly, it's great to have a passive source of income. It's not just enough to get that money from your business or your salary. You need to make your money work, and you can do so by investing it in the right avenues. Fixed deposits, mutual funds, real estate. Make sure you're investing it some way, in a way that it will in turn keep giving you a regular source of income. All right, well, there you have it. That's everything you need to know about retirement. But you know, it's the end of July and it's really been a very, very stressful month for everybody who watches the market very closely. So we decided, let's make this a regular feature, talk about which are the best performing mutual funds and the worst performing mutual funds for the month of July. Let's start off with the best performing funds. And you do have some of these really great performers. You have the Sundaram Select Thematic Funds PSU Opportunities, which has managed to treble in NAV. This is of course only in the month of July. So if you've invested on the 1st of July, your money has gotten trebled or 200%. There's also the CPSE ETF FFO. By the way, we were talking about the next tranche that was just released on the 18th of July. The Tax Infra Saving Fund as well has done pretty well, a 9% return. And finally, the Kotak World Gold Fund. Okay, that number is wrong. It's actually approximately 8.9%. That's roughly what the Kotak World Gold Fund has delivered in the month of July. The ETF is something that's particularly very fascinating. Like I said, it's a basket of the PSUs which the government has created for the purpose of divestment. However, it certainly was a very tough market condition that we were staring at. And it's interesting to note that the losses still were capped. In the month of July, you had the Sundaram Multi-Asset Fund growth that declined 16%, and the Kotak PSU Bank ETF. A lot of PSU banking stocks did see a very bad July, so that one was as well down by almost 15.5%. Small cap fund declined 14%, transportation fund 12% gone, and the infra fund as well lost about 12%. Thematic funds, as you can see, you know, this one, the infra fund and the PSU banking fund. Thematic funds, of course, do require an extensive amount of research, so you need to ensure that you are careful when you invest in thematic funds. Okay, folks, that's all we have for you then on this edition of The Money Show. But some programming reminders. Come Friday, that's the 2nd of August, we decided that instead of correcting your portfolios for you or telling you what to buy, we will get you some self-help. What are the perfect ingredients for creating an ideal portfolio, whether it is shares, mutual funds, fixed deposits, debt mutual funds? How can you create a portfolio that will help you create long-term wealth? And for that, we will be joined by a very special guest, Naresh Shah of Kotak AMC. So if you have any questions or queries on how should you kickstart your investment journey, which stocks should you start off with, or rather which mutual funds should you start off with, what sort of course, steps should you take to build your portfolio, send them to us on themoneyShow@etnow.tv, or you can call in on 24990388. But you need to do that now, as it is always easier for me to get your questions and queries answered. 2nd August, 5 p.m. is when you can catch this very special edition. And of course, don't forget, we have the TMS Savings Challenge as well that I will be launching tomorrow. But for now, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching.